Stay down, they'll spot us. Should we hide ourselves in the trees? Go, and be ready with your arrows. The carriage will pass by this route any minute now. The bushes began to move. Something was there. All the men stayed firm in their positions, ready to attack. Just then, a deer jumped out from behind the bushes, and all the men sighed with relief. The carriage was late. Sir, I don't think this route is quite safe. I hear a group of bandits live in this forest. They call themselves merry men. Don't worry about it. Who can ruin me? I have the treasures of the world. Ha ha ha. All of a sudden, there was a single bird call. The faint rustling of leaves. The coachman stopped the horses. What happened? Something doesn't feel right. Out of the blue jumped out a man armed with a long bow, just a distance far. He wore a feathered cap, hiding part of his face. His eyes could barely be seen, staring directly at the carriage. Dressed in Lincoln green, it was the famous outlaw, Robin Hood. Come on, men, get all the booty. The men jumped out of the trees and ran towards the carriage when Robin Hood caught one by the shoulder and murmured, "Don't harm the men." The coachman was long gone. He ran away at the first sight of Robin Hood. The heavy man rolled out of his carriage with great difficulty. Panting, he showed his red face and his golden sword. "I'll kill every one of you if you touch my gold." Robin Hood came through his men and twisted the sword out of the man's hand. "It's all right, there'll be no need for that. Gather all the things, men, and tie this man to his carriage and send it back to the town empty." All done. What shall we do with all this? Give a feast and distribute it among the poor. These arrogant rich men don't deserve all this wealth. Robin Hood. Legend has it that he was an outlaw living in Sherwood Forest with his merry men. An incredibly handsome man clothed in garments of Lincoln green, robbing the rich to give to the poor, and outwitting the evil sheriff of Nottingham. Or maybe he only robbed the rich because the poor didn't have anything to steal from. Nevertheless, Robin Hood and his merry men remain a permanent part of popular culture that every child hears growing up. But how much of these tales are actually true? The story has been around for centuries now, but the most familiar aspects of Robin Hood are the most recent additions to the classic tale. Like the roots of Sherwood Forest, we would have to go deep into English history to find the origins of Robin Hood. We find his name all over the English map, from Robin Hood's cave to Robin Hood's stoop in Derbyshire and Robin Hood's well in Barnsdale Forest, Yorkshire. The interesting part of the stories of Robin Hood lies in the fact that as we trace it back to the 14th century, the figure of Robin Hood itself changes with time. The earliest versions would be almost unrecognizable when compared with the bow-wielding, handsome man in green tights we know today as Robin Hood. As England evolved as the centuries passed, so did the tale of Robin Hood. Every time the story was shared from person to person, with each iteration, the legend would include new characters, settings, and traits, making it more interesting, more entertaining, evolving it into what we have today. In search for the real Robin Hood, numerous scholars in the 19th century embarked on a search after Sir Walter Scott published his book Ivanhoe in 1820. This novel renewed the modern interest in the figure of Robin Hood and raised the question of whether this king of outlaws, prince of the good fellows, was a real person or not. In the novel, Scott portrays Robin as an honorable Englishman, loyal to the absent King Richard. On their search, historians have discovered that many different versions of the same Robin Hood dotted the history of medieval England. English legal records as early as the 13th century show a Robhod or Rubbenhod, and similar names have become common epithets for criminals. A reference was found in a 1226 court register from Yorkshire, England. It cited the expropriation of the property of one Robin Hood and described him as a fugitive. In another reference in 1262, in southern England, there are similar mentions of a man named William Robhod in Berkshire. In 1354, there is another record of an imprisoned man named Robin Hood who was awaiting trial in the farther north in Northamptonshire. With all these different records, historians have come to the conclusion that instead of being a single person who inspired these popular stories, it seemed to be a moniker that became a typical alias used by outlaws in various times and locations across England. But the question that remains is that, what inspired the people to keep such names? A fictional tale? Or an infamous bandit? Or an amalgam of both? Historical records have failed to show evidence of a definite personage behind this noble outlaw, but it turns out that much material about this character has been found in English folklore, poetry, and ballads. By the time the 15th century rolled around, the Robin Hood legend took a new turn and began its first trappings of rebellion against the ruling class. Robin Hood and the Monk is one of the oldest known written ballads about this character. It is the earliest ballad to be set in Sherwood Forest near Nottingham. According to other ballads, the setting of Robin Hood's adventures was in Barnesdale Forest, which is in South Yorkshire and not in Sherwood Forest. As time passed, the legend became more closely related with Sherwood, where the sheriff was the greatest enemy of Robin Hood. Knock knock, who's there? Robin Hood. Robin Hood who? Robin the rich to give to the poor. We may never know for sure whether Robin Hood ever existed outside the pages of books. But what we do know for sure is that the notion of a brave rebel who lived on the outskirts of society, fighting injustice and oppression, has universal appeal. And even if we did know who Robin Hood was, there would be people young and old traveling to England's Nottinghamshire region to tour Sherwood Forest and see the alleged hangouts of Robin Hood and his merry men. In the early 20th century, Robin Hood went from the pages of books to the cinema, and the tale was reinvented and retold time and time again, just like how it had been told with every new publication. In each version, you will find glimmers of the original ballads and poems, as each new point, place, and people adds more to the legend of the Prince of Thieves.